The night was cold and silent on the alien outpost. The human soldier sat alone in his small room, staring at the steel walls. He had been at war for years, and even now that the fighting had stopped, peace did not feel real. The outpost was a prison in disguise, and he was nothing more than a guard for alien masters. He remembered the battles, the screams, the endless loss. He remembered how his friends had fallen one by one. Now only silence kept him company. He sat on the edge of his metal bed, his hands heavy, his thoughts darker than the sky outside. The door to his room hissed open with a metallic sound. 2 alien guards stepped in, tall and cruel, their armor glowing faintly in the dim light. Between them stood a girl, young and fragile, her hands bound with glowing chains. Her skin shimmered faintly, marked with bruises, and her eyes were wide with fear. The guards smirked, their voices sharp and mocking. "She is a gift for you, human. Enjoy her as you wish," one said. Then they laughed and shoved her forward before leaving. The heavy door shut behind them, the lock clicking into place. The soldier stared, his chest tight. The girl did not look at him. She kept her head low, trembling like a bird trapped in a storm. Her breathing was shallow, her lips pressed tight as if she expected pain. The chains on her wrists glowed against her pale skin, cutting into the flesh beneath. He clenched his fists, rage rising inside him. This was what the aliens thought of him. A beast, a creature that would take pleasure in cruelty. They wanted to see if he would break her spirit, if he would prove himself as savage as they believed. But he was not like them, and he would not play their game. For a long moment the room was silent. The girl dared not move, the sound of her chains echoing with each tiny breath. The soldier stood, his boots hitting the floor with heavy steps. The girl flinched, pressing herself against the wall, her eyes shut tight. But he did not hurt her. Instead, he walked to the table and picked up a piece of bread from the untouched food tray. He returned and knelt down, holding the bread out to her. Her eyes opened, confusion mixing with fear. "Take it," he said quietly, his voice gentle but firm. "I won't harm you." She stared at him, uncertain. Her lips trembled as she slowly reached out, her thin fingers brushing against his hand before snatching the bread. She hesitated, then took a small bite. Tears filled her strange, luminous eyes as the taste of food met her tongue. For the first time in a long time, she tasted kindness. The soldier's heart ached as he watched her eat slowly, like someone who had learned never to trust that food would be given again. When she finished, he gently reached for her chains. With careful hands, he unfastened them, tossing the glowing cuffs aside. Her skin was raw beneath the marks, and he muttered under his breath, "Monsters, they are monsters for doing this." The girl whispered something in her own language. He could not understand the words, but he understood the tone, broken, pleading, afraid. He shook his head, his eyes soft. "You're safe here," he said, though he knew it was dangerous to make such a promise. He pulled a blanket from his bed and wrapped it around her shoulders. She looked at him in shock, as if unable to believe what was happening. Her kind had seen humans as weapons, destroyers, nothing more. But here, in this quiet moment, she saw something different. The soldier sat back on the edge of his bed, his eyes fixed on the door. He knew the guards would expect him to treat her as they wished. He knew they would come back, and if they found her untouched, he would pay the price. But he no longer cared. For the first time in years, he felt something inside him stir. Not the cold weight of duty, not the empty rage of war, but the spark of humanity. The girl curled up in the corner, clutching the blanket, her wide eyes still watching him. Fear still lingered, but beneath it there was a small flicker of hope. The soldier kept his weapon close, his hand steady, because he knew what would happen soon. The aliens would test him, push him, try to break him. But he had made his choice. He would not be their beast. He would not break her spirit. Instead, he would defy them, even if it cost him his life. That night, a silent bond was formed between them. One born not from cruelty, but from mercy. Not from fear, but from defiance. And in the heart of an alien prison where darkness ruled, A spark of hope began to burn. The soldier did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing with certainty. He would protect her, no matter the cost. And as the alien girl drifted into uneasy sleep, the soldier sat in silence, his resolve hard as iron, his spirit unbroken, because he understood something the aliens never would. True strength was not in cruelty. It was in compassion. And this choice, this single act of defiance, was only the beginning. The outpost woke early, the sound of heavy boots and metallic doors echoing through the halls. The human soldier sat quietly in his room, his eyes on the girl who still slept in the corner. Her breathing was slow, her thin hands clutching the blanket he had given her. For a brief moment, she looked peaceful, though he knew it would not last. He had made his choice the night before. He would protect her, but that choice carried danger. The aliens were not blind, and they would soon notice his refusal to follow their cruel game. The soldier strapped his boots and checked his weapon, his mind clear, his heart steady. The girl stirred, opening her glowing eyes. For a moment, fear returned to her face, as if she had dreamed safety only to wake to pain. But then she saw the blanket, saw the food tray where crumbs still rested. She saw him, sitting across the room, calm and still. Her fear softened, replaced by confusion. She whispered something in her own tongue. He could not understand, but her voice carried both thanks and disbelief. He offered her a faint smile, shaking his head. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. Though he doubted she understood, the tone reached her, and she nodded slightly. The heavy door opened, the sound sharp and cold. 2 alien officers entered, their armor brighter, their presence heavier than the guards from before. They looked at the girl first, their cruel eyes scanning her face and wrists. Then they turned to the soldier, their mouths curling with disappointment. "You did not touch her," one hissed, his words cutting. "You insult us with this weakness," said the other. The soldier stood tall, his voice calm but sharp. "I am not an animal. If you wanted a monster, you chose the wrong man." The officers exchanged dark looks. They stepped closer, their shadows falling across him. "Be careful, human," one said. "Mercy is not strength here. It is death." When they left, the door slammed harder than before. The girl trembled, her hands gripping the blanket. She understood enough to know danger was coming. The soldier walked over, kneeling in front of her. "They will test us," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "They will try to break me, but I won't let them win." She stared at him, her luminous eyes filled with something new. Not just fear, but a fragile trust. Over the next days, their strange bond began to grow. She remained quiet, moving carefully, watching him with wary eyes. But she began to eat without hesitation when he gave her food. She began to sit closer, though still at a distance. And sometimes, when she thought he was not looking, she studied his face as if searching for answers. One evening, when the outpost was quiet and the guards had not come, the girl touched his arm lightly, her voice trembling. She spoke a few words in broken human tongue. "Why, you help me." The soldier looked at her, startled. Her voice was small, her accent heavy, but the meaning was clear. He hesitated, searching for words. "Because no one else will," he said softly. "Because you don't deserve this." Her eyes widened, and for a long moment she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Different. You are different." Her hand pulled back quickly, as if afraid she had said too much. But the soldier felt a weight lift from his chest. She understood, even if only a little. The peace did not last. 2 nights later, the aliens returned. They stormed into his room, dragging the girl with them. Their voices sharp, their orders cruel. "She belongs to us, not to you. Human, do not forget your place." The soldier stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. But he forced himself still. Too many eyes, too many guns. They laughed as they pulled the girl back out. Her terrified eyes locked on his, a silent plea. Then the door slammed, leaving him alone. He paced the room, his chest burning. Every instinct told him to act, but one wrong move would see them both executed. He had to wait, had a plan. But waiting was its own torture. Hours passed before they threw her back into his room. Her face was pale, her steps unsteady. Her wrists were bruised again, her eyes full of pain. He caught her before she fell, easing her down gently. "Did they hurt you?" he asked, though he knew the answer. She shook her head weakly, but tears betrayed her silence. His anger boiled, a storm he could barely contain. This was no game anymore. The aliens were pushing him, waiting to see when he would break. As he cleaned the wounds on her wrists, the girl whispered, "They want you cruel," her voice breaking. He nodded, his jaw tight. "They will never get that from me," he swore. And in that moment, the bond between them deepened. No longer was she just a captive in his room. She was someone he had chosen to protect. And he knew the fight ahead would be more dangerous than any war he had ever faced. Because now it was not about survival. It was about defiance. It was about proving that even in the darkest place, humanity could shine. And he promised himself, as he sat beside her fragile form, that no matter what the aliens did, he would not give up. He would not abandon her. The war he thought was over had only just begun. But this time, he was not fighting for Earth. He was fighting for her. The soldier did not sleep that night. He sat with his back against the cold wall, his weapon across his knees. Every sound in the corridor made him tense. Every footstep reminded him that the aliens could come at any moment. The girl lay in the corner, her eyes half closed, her breathing uneven. She had endured something terrible before they threw her back, yet she had not spoken more. When dawn came, the outpost lights flickered on, bright and harsh. The soldier brought her water, and she drank slowly, her hands trembling. For the first time, she did not lower her gaze when looking at him. Her luminous eyes met his directly, and in them he saw not just fear, but something else. A spark of trust, fragile yet real. Hours passed in silence, until she whispered a single word in broken human tongue. "Family." The soldier leaned closer. "Family?" She nodded, then lifted her thin hands and made a small gesture. Two hands joined, then pulled apart. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered again, "Gone." He understood. Her family had been taken or destroyed. The war had not spared her people any more than it had spared his. Something inside him hardened. She was no longer just a girl forced into his room. She was a survivor, like him, carrying scars that never healed. That night, while she rested, the soldier thought of Earth. He remembered the city lights, the sound of rivers, the warmth of sunlight on his face. Things she had never known, things she might never see. A quiet vow grew in his chest. If there was even the smallest chance, he would show her that world. The next day, rumors spread through the barracks. Other humans whispered about him, their voices sharp with judgment. "He's soft," one said. "The aliens will punish us all for his weakness." Another spat. "If he doesn't obey, they'll make an example out of him." The soldier ignored their words, but the weight pressed heavy. He was alone in this choice, and soon the price would come. That evening, the aliens returned. This time it was not guards, but an officer cloaked in silver, his eyes like sharp blades. He walked into the room without hesitation, his boots ringing against the floor. The girl froze, shrinking back, her lips pressed tight. The officer looked at her, then at the soldier, a cruel smile twisting his face. "You protect her," he said, his voice like poison. "Why? She is nothing. She was sent for your pleasure, not your pity." The soldier stood firm, his jaw clenched. "I will not harm her. That is my answer." The officer's smile widened, though his eyes burned with rage. "Then we will see how long you last, human." He left as quickly as he came, the door slamming shut. The girl's hands shook, her body pressed against the wall as if she wanted to disappear. The soldier knelt in front of her, his voice low, steady. "They won't break me," he promised. "You don't have to fear me. Not ever." Her eyes filled with tears, and slowly, with hesitation, she reached out and touched his hand. The gesture was small, but it was everything. For the first time, she had chosen to believe him. In the days that followed, She began to speak more. Her words were broken, mixed with her own language, but slowly he began to understand. She told him of her village, of a sky filled with glowing rivers, of songs her people once sang. She told him of the night soldiers came, fire raining from the sky, and how she had been taken. Her voice shook as she remembered, but still she spoke. Because someone was finally listening, the soldier listened to every word, anger burning deeper in his chest. He knew now that keeping her safe was not enough. The aliens had destroyed too much, and if he did nothing, they would destroy more. One night, as the outpost lay in silence, the girl whispered a question. "Why are you different?" The soldier looked at her, the weight of war heavy in his eyes. "Because I remember what it means to be human," he said softly. "And humans, we don't survive by cruelty. We survive by protecting one another." She stared at him for a long time, then whispered, "Hero." The word was soft, uncertain, but it pierced through him. He shook his head, "No, imnoru." But she only repeated the word, firmer this time, as if she wanted him to believe it. That night he lay awake, her voice echoing in his mind. Hero. He had never felt like one, not after the things he had done, the lives he had lost. But maybe this was his chance to be something better, not for medals, not for orders, not for war, but for her. The aliens would not stop. He could feel their eyes on him, watching, waiting, planning. But the bond between him and the girl had grown too strong to break. And he knew the next test would come soon, a test that might cost him everything. Still, as he looked at her sleeping peacefully for the first time, he made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, he would not let her face it alone. The soldier felt it before it happened. The outpost was too quiet, the corridors too empty. When silence stretched too long in a place of cruelty, it meant the storm was waiting. And tonight it came. The door to his room burst open with a violent hiss. 4 alien guards stormed in, their weapons glowing, their heavy steps shaking the ground. Behind them, the silver-cloaked officer entered slowly, his cruel smile carved deep into his face. The girl froze, clutching the blanket around her thin frame, her eyes wide with terror. "Enough games," the officer said, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "You think mercy makes you strong, human, but mercy is weakness. You protect this girl as if she matters. So we will take her, and we will see what you are without her." 2 guards stepped forward, seizing the girl by her arms. She cried out, twisting, but the chains snapped around her wrists again. Her eyes searched for the soldier, desperate, pleading. The soldier's fists clenched, his chest burning with fury. He had known this moment would come, but the sight still tore at him. "Stop," he growled, his voice low, dangerous. The officer raised a brow, mocking. "Or what? You are one man against an empire. Do you think your defiance changes anything?" The guards began to drag the girl toward the door. Her voice broke in a scream, "No, please." The soldier moved, faster than thought, his hand grabbing his weapon. He leveled it at the guards, the barrel steady, his finger on the trigger. The room froze. The aliens looked back at him, their laughter fading into silence. The officer's smile thinned, his eyes narrowing. "You dare," he whispered. "You point a weapon at us?" "For her." The soldier's voice cut through the air, sharp as steel. "If you touch her again, I will kill you. I don't care what you do to me after, but I will not let you take her." The tension in the room thickened. One wrong move would end in blood. The guards shifted uneasily, their grips tightening on their weapons. The girl's eyes shone with tears, fear, and hope mixed together. Finally, the officer lifted a hand, halting his men. His cruel smile returned, though thinner now, edged with anger. "Very well, human, you have teeth after all. But remember this, when you bite, we bite harder. And when we bite, we do not stop until there is nothing left." With a sharp gesture, the guard shoved the girl back into the room. She stumbled, falling to her knees, the chains clattering against the floor. The officer stepped close to the soldier, his voice a hiss only he could hear. "You cannot protect her forever. One day you will sleep. One day you will turn away. And on that day, she will be ours again." Then he turned, his cloak sweeping behind him, and the guards followed him out. The door slammed, leaving the soldier and the girl alone. For a moment, the room was silent except for her sobbing breaths. The soldier dropped to his knees beside her, his hands shaking as he removed the chains. Her wrists were raw again, her skin burning from the cuffs. He wrapped them gently, whispering, "I won't let them take you. Not now, not ever." She looked at him through tears, her voice breaking. "They strong, Minnie. You won. Why fight?" The soldier met her gaze, his eyes dark but steady. "Because they believe cruelty is strength, and someone has to prove them wrong." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she whispered again, that same word she had used before. "Hero." He shook his head, but she pressed her hand to his chest, over his heart. "Hero," she repeated, firmer this time. That night, neither of them slept. The soldier kept his weapon close, watching the door. The girl sat near him, her small frame wrapped in the blanket. Every sound in the corridor made her flinch, but she no longer hid in the corner. She stayed close, as if his presence alone kept the shadows away. The days that followed grew darker. The aliens no longer mocked openly. They watched in silence, their eyes cold, waiting, planning. The other humans whispered too, some with fear, others with resentment. They knew his defiance had painted a target not only on his back, but on theirs as well. But the soldier did not waver. Each night, he told the girl the same words, even if she did not understand them all. "You are safe here. I will not let them win." And though fear never left her eyes, hope began to grow beside it. Hope that maybe, in this place of chains and cruelty, there was someone who would not bend. Someone who would fight, even when the fight seemed impossible. The soldier knew the officer would return. He knew the next test would be harder. But he also knew this. He was no longer fighting alone. He was fighting for her. And that gave him strength the aliens could never understand. The war in the outpost had shifted. No longer was it about orders, about survival. It was about defiance. It was about one human and one alien girl against the cruelty of an empire. And in the heart of darkness, that defiance had just begun. The soldier knew the officer would not forget. Every moment since that night felt heavy. Every shadow carried a threat. The aliens had not tried again to take the girl, but their silence was worse than their cruelty. It meant they were waiting, watching, planning. The girl stayed close to him now, never more than a few steps away. At night, she slept against the wall near his bed, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. When she woke from nightmares, he spoke softly until her trembling stopped. When she whispered broken words about her past, he listened without turning away. But as the days stretched into weeks, the soldier realized something. This could not go on forever. Sooner or later, the aliens would act, and when they did, it would not be a test. It would be final. One night, as the outpost lights dimmed, he sat on the floor with his weapon across his lap. The girl sat beside him, her knees pulled to her chest, her glowing eyes watching him. He spoke in a low voice, knowing she might not understand every word. "We can't stay here. If we do, they'll break us. We need to leave, somehow." She tilted her head, confusion in her eyes. "Leave?" she whispered, the word heavy with both hope and fear. He nodded firmly. "Yes, escape." The girl looked at the door, then back at him. She shook her head quickly. "Impossible? Guards many." Her voice trembled, but her eyes carried more fear for him than for herself. He smiled faintly, though it did not reach his eyes. "Impossible doesn't mean hopeless. It means dangerous, and I've lived with danger all my life." For the next few days, he watched carefully. He noted when the guards changed shifts, how long the halls were empty, which doors opened with the least resistance. He listened to the other soldiers' whispers, catching fragments of information. A supply ship came once every cycle, and the loading bay was less guarded than the prison wing. It was a slim chance, but it was a chance. The girl noticed his silence, the way his eyes followed every sound. One evening she touched his arm lightly, her voice small. "You plan?" He nodded. "Yes, I plan for us." Her lips parted, shock and fear mixing. "Why risk?" He met her gaze, his voice steady. "Because you deserve more than this. Because you should not die in chains." Tears filled her eyes, but she shook her head. "They kill you." The soldier's jaw tightened. "Maybe, but if I do nothing, they win. And I can't let them win." That night, he showed her how to move quietly. He taught her simple signs: stop, hide, follow. She learned quickly, her fear sharpening her focus. For the first time, she was no longer just a prisoner depending on him. She was his partner in survival. The test came sooner than he expected. The silver-cloaked officer returned, flanked by twice as many guards. They did not enter this time. Instead, they stood at the door, watching silently, their eyes cold and full of promise. Then they left without a word. The silence they left behind was heavier than any threat. The soldier exhaled slowly. "They know," he muttered. "They're waiting for me to make a mistake." The girl touched his hand, her voice trembling. "Escape soon." He looked at her, surprised. She had said the word herself, in his language. Her fear was still there, but so was determination. That night, he decided, when the next supply ship came, they would move. He did not tell her everything. He did not tell her that the plan might fail, that the odds were against them. But he told her the one truth that mattered. "We try. Together." The girl nodded, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. For the first time since she had been forced into his room, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was life beyond these walls. And as the soldier lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his weapon within reach, he felt the weight of his choice pressing down. This was no longer about defiance alone. This was about escape. This was about freedom. He knew the aliens would not let them go easily. He knew blood would be spilled before the end. But he also knew this. He had found something worth fighting for. And for that, he was ready to risk everything. The day of the supply ship arrived. The soldier felt the tension in the air long before the alarms announced its docking. The outpost buzzed with activity, guards moving crates, officers barking orders. It was the perfect chaos and the most dangerous moment. He looked at the girl, her luminous eyes wide with both fear and determination. She wore a simple cloak he had stolen from the storage bay, the hood shadowing her face. Her small frame trembled, but when she met his gaze, she nodded once. She was ready. They waited until the corridor outside their quarters grew loud with voices. Then the soldier opened the hidden panel he had loosened days ago. Behind it was a narrow maintenance shaft, dark and cramped. "Go," he whispered, motioning for her to crawl inside. She hesitated only a moment before obeying. Her movements were quiet, careful, and he followed close behind, sealing the panel shut behind them. The shaft smelled of dust and oil, the walls pressing in on them. Every scrape of their hands against metal echoed in the silence. The soldier led the way, counting turns, memorizing distances. He had studied the schematics long enough to know where it ended. The loading bay. At last, they reached a grate overlooking the busy hangar. Alien guards patrolled below, crates stacked high beside the looming shadow of the supply ship. The girl pressed close to him, her breath quick and shallow. The soldier placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Wait for my signal," he whispered. He worked the grate loose, lowering it silently onto the floor. Then he dropped down, landing behind a stack of crates. The girl followed, light and silent, her eyes darting nervously. They stayed low, moving through shadows, each step measured. Every second stretched into eternity. They were halfway across the hangar when a voice rang out. "Human." The soldier froze, his heart sinking. The silver-cloaked officer stood at the far end, his cruel smile sharp as a blade. Around him, guards raised their weapons, the glow lighting the hangar like fire. The girl gasped, clutching his arm. The officer's voice boomed. "You thought you could escape us? You thought one man could defy an empire? You are a fool, and now both of you will suffer." The soldier's mind raced. He could fight, but there were too many. He could surrender, but that meant her chains forever. There was only one choice left. Run. Now, he shouted, grabbing her hand. They sprinted toward the ship, blaster fire exploding around them. Crates shattered, sparks flying through the air. The girl stumbled, but he pulled her up, never letting go. Guards closed in from both sides. The soldier fired, his shots precise, each one dropping an enemy. But for every guard that fell, two more appeared. The hangar thundered with chaos, shouts, and the roar of engines. They reached the ship's ramp just as it began to rise. The soldier shoved the girl forward, boosting her onto the platform. He leapt after her, rolling to his feet, his weapon blazing. The officer's voice echoed behind them, furious. Stop them. Do not let them leave. Inside the ship, alarms blared, crew members shouting in confusion. The soldier dragged the girl down the narrow corridor, searching desperately. They needed cover, they needed time. At last he found a storage room and shoved her inside, slamming the door shut. Her eyes were wide, her chest heaving. She whispered, "We caught." He shook his head, his voice firm. "Not yet. We still have a chance." He leaned against the door, his weapon ready. Boots thundered in the corridor outside, voices shouting commands. The girl clutched his sleeve, her voice trembling. "They never stop. Why you fight still?" The soldier looked at her, his eyes burning with resolve. "Because I promised you, and because if we stop fighting now, we lose everything." The door shuddered as something struck it. The girl gasped, backing away. The soldier tightened his grip on his weapon, his heart steady. This was no longer just escape. This was survival. The walls shook as the ship began to lift from the outpost. Engines roared, gravity shifted. The soldier braced himself as the door burst open, guards flooding in. Blaster fire lit the room, chaos exploding in seconds. He fought with everything he had, his weapons scorching the air, his fists breaking bones when ammo ran low. The girl crouched low behind crates, covering her ears, her glowing eyes wide with terror. But even through fear, she never took her eyes off him. Because in every strike, in every desperate shot, he was fighting not for himself, but for her. The battle raged until the storage room was a wreck of smoke and sparks. The soldier stood panting, blood on his face, bodies on the floor around him. He turned to the girl, extending a hand. "Come on, we're not done yet." She hesitated, then took his hand, her grip tight. Together they ran deeper into the ship as the stars outside grew brighter. They had escaped the outpost, but now the entire ship was against them. And beyond that, the Empire itself. Still, as long as he was alive, as long as he could fight, he would not let her go, because she was no longer just a captive. She was the reason he refused to break. And though the enemy surrounded them, the spark of hope between them burned stronger than ever. The ship thundered through space, stars streaking across the windows. Inside, alarms blared, red lights flashing against the steel walls. The soldier pulled the girl with him down narrow corridors, their steps echoing. Behind them, shouts and weapons fire grew louder, the enemy hunting them through the vessel. They turned a corner and nearly collided with another squad of guards. The soldier fired before they could react, his shots striking true. The girl ducked low, clutching the cloak around her, her eyes wide with fear, but her feet steady. She had stopped trembling like before. Now she ran beside him, trusting him with every step. They reached the engine bay, the roar of machinery filling the air. The soldier scanned the room quickly. "This is it," he muttered. "If we take control here, we have a chance." The girl tugged his sleeve, pointing at a narrow ladder leading to the upper catwalks. He nodded, lifting her up first, then climbing after. From the catwalk, they could see the vast core of the ship glowing bright, energy pulsing like a heartbeat. But they were not alone. The silver-cloaked officer stepped from the shadows, his cruel smile cutting through the noise. "So this is where you run?" he sneered, like a rat cornered in its cage. "Did you really think you could steal freedom from us?" The girl froze, clutching the railing, her breath quick. The soldier placed himself between her and the officer, his weapon steady. "You'll never take her back," he said, his voice calm but sharp as steel. The officer's laughter echoed through the bay. "You are one man. I command an empire. When you fall, no one will even remember your name." The soldier shook his head, his eyes hard. "Maybe, but she will, and that's enough." The officer's smile twisted into anger. He lunged forward, faster than expected, his blade glowing with energy. The soldier met him head-on, steel clashing against light, sparks flying. The sound of their fight thundered through the engine bay. The girl cried out but did not run. Instead, she searched desperately, her eyes darting across the machinery. At last she saw it, a control panel glowing with strange symbols. She did not fully understand it, but she remembered the marks from her people's ships long ago. She pressed her trembling hands against it, searching for the right sequence. Meanwhile, the battle raged. The soldier blocked strike after strike, his muscles straining. The officer was stronger, faster, his blade burning through the air, but the soldier fought with something more. Not orders, not survival, but defiance. Every strike carried the weight of his promise to her. The officer sneered as their blades locked. "You cannot win," he hissed. The soldier gritted his teeth, forcing him back. "Maybe not, but I can make sure you lose." Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, alarms screaming louder. The girl had pressed a final sequence on the panel, and the engines roared out of control. The officer staggered, his balance broken. The soldier seized the moment, driving his weapon forward, striking true. The officer fell, his cloak tearing as he collapsed onto the catwalk. His final words were a hiss. "She will never be free." Then silence. The girl rushed to the soldier, her eyes filled with fear and relief. "You hurt?" she whispered, her small hands gripping his arm. He shook his head, though blood streaked his cheek. "I'm fine, but we need to move now." They raced back through the corridors as the ship shook violently. Smoke filled the halls, sparks rained from broken wires. The soldier pulled her into the escape pod bay. One pod remained, its hatch open, lights blinking. He pushed her inside first, then followed, slamming the hatch shut. The pod shook as it launched, spinning free from the dying ship. Through the small window, they watched as the vessel erupted in flames, breaking apart against the endless night. For a long moment, there was only silence. The girl pressed close to him, her breathing uneven. Then she whispered, "Free." The soldier looked at her, exhaustion heavy in his eyes. "Yes, free." The pod drifted through the stars, carried by fate. Neither of them knew where it would land. Maybe on a friendly world, maybe in empty space. But it didn't matter, because they were no longer captives. They had chosen defiance, and they had survived. The girl rested her head against his shoulder, her eyes closing at last. Before sleep took her, she whispered one final word, "Hero." The soldier closed his eyes, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe. Maybe she was right. Maybe being a hero wasn't about winning wars or wearing medals. Maybe it was simply about choosing mercy, choosing to protect, choosing to save. And as the pod sailed quietly through the dark, the bond between them burned brighter than the stars outside. A human and an alien girl defying an empire. Together, they had begun something greater than war. Together, they had found hope.